Yo, I'm here talking about Exodus, Gods and Kings. I've seen it twice, and it was pretty darn good. So I'm just going to give a little spiel about what I thought of it and why. Pay no attention to the glare in my glasses. First of all, I want to say how great it was. I was really impressed with it, especially if the rumors are true. I don't know. I heard that the director is an atheist, and if that's the case, then that's even more impressive because it means that he followed scripture really well, actually. It also explains some of the relativistic comments that were thrown in there, and how the plagues were depicted as natural disasters, which, by the way, faith and reason work completely well together. So, because God created science, so naturally he could choose to do that and use his own creation. So I'm not bashing the movie at all. I'm just giving my opinion and some spoiler alerts, just so you know, and talking a little bit about what really went down. The film followed scripture pretty well, especially up until the burning bush scene. I was a little bit disappointed with the burning bush scene just because it depicts God as basically an angry child throwing a tantrum. That was a little disappointing. But at the same time, there's a lot of potential to unpack that in a catechesis, for example, because you can teach from that as God being so humble that he comes in the form of a boy, which, by the way, foreshadows Christ in this Christmas season. Who'd have thunk? You can also teach from that as in the Old Testament, because they didn't have Christ and the crucifixion, ergo they didn't have any way to receive grace anymore because of the fall. God is sometimes seen as or portrayed as a God of wrath, just because, like a good parent, you have to discipline your children, and in the Old Testament the disciplines seemed a little bit more harsh because they didn't have grace inside of them yet. So yeah, God's a little boy throwing a tantrum, kind of creepy, by the way, kind of depicted as a little horror story boy. He was creepy. And so in the movie, it kind of just depicts God as being like vengeful, which he is. God is a jealous God, it says in scripture, and he loves us, so he wants the best for us, and he hates seeing us suffer and at the hands of others as well. But the movie could have done a little bit of a better job. But the scene where the little boy God gets angry and upset and he starts yelling at Moses about how he wants them to be down on their knees and begging for it to stop, like his voice cracks because he's so upset. That part is actually really touching to me because it shows the root of God's anger is love. And it also says a lot about how God chooses to rely on us, humanity, in a way. He chooses to cooperate with us and ask for our cooperation in return out of love, which is awesome. God rocks. I think it's portrayed really well in the film how God chooses to rely on Moses in that same way in freeing the Hebrews from the Egyptians. It also kind of seems like Moses just gets in God's way a lot of the time. There's this one scene in particular that I'm thinking of that God says to Moses, basically, I don't need you, and you brought yourself into this mess kind of thing. Whereas in scripture, it's more of a cooperation and a union, which again shows how amazing God is, how he relies on humanity in a way. Not that he has to, but he chooses to. That being said, there was a lot of potential for Moses' spiritual growth throughout the movie, and I think that it just kind of skimmed the surface. Whereas, he seemed to be defiant, and in scripture it's a little bit different. It goes down a little bit differently. So what really went down? Well, let me tell you. Moses was stubborn. But he also respected God, and he honored the people, and he did everything that he did out of love, even if it seemed defiant to the world. So I think the movie does portray that a little bit. Fun facts. Moses' staff was kind of a big deal. It symbolized him being the good shepherd and how that foreshadows Jesus Christ as the good shepherd. And it also shows just how God chooses the humble, those people who care for his children. And if you look throughout the scriptures, God often chooses little shepherd boys, King David, Moses, etc., for his job because he recognizes that shepherds know how to lead in a humble way. So I was a little disappointed as well that the movie threw out the shepherd staff because that does symbolize so much and replaced it with the sword, which has a different meaning that has more of a ferocious war hero type of vibe. But I appreciate the artistic depiction of different methods of leading as well. Another fun fact, Moses had a speech impediment, and that's why Aaron played such a huge role. Aaron was his spokesperson, and his brother, of course, but he was also his spokesperson. God spoke to Moses, Moses spoke to Aaron, and Aaron spoke to the people. And in the movie, Aaron didn't really play that big of a role, but that's fine. It was a 2.5-hour film, and like details like that can be shirked a little bit. I understand and respect that. This is huge. Are you ready for this? A huge fun fact is that the plagues, each of the plagues, symbolize a different god that the Egyptians worshipped. And that's why it's so cool that God chose to use these plagues to teach the Egyptians that he, God, is more powerful than their gods. Every single one of those plagues is God saying to them, this isn't your God, I'm your God. I'm more powerful. It's God defeating their false gods. Super cool. So I wish that the movie depicted that a little bit better. But if you look carefully and you know what you're looking for, you can see that in the film. In Ramses' monologue, for example, he says, I am God, I am God. He threatens to kill all the Hebrew children. And he basically challenges the Hebrew God to see who can be more destructive and kill more. And see, the thing with that is, the Pharaoh was considered a god to the Egyptians, and the firstborn son of the Pharaoh would be the heir to the throne, ergo, the next Pharaoh, ergo, their next god, if you will. And that's why all the plagues end with the killing of the firstborn son. That's God saying, no, like, I'm God. You're just hurting yourselves by believing that you are God because you're not. So that scene kind of depicted that, and which is really cool. But you'd have to like know that in advance, which is fine, but whatever. Anyway. And with the Passover meal, it would have been so cool if the movie had depicted this, that there's just so much in the Passover meal that foreshadows Christ, and it's super cool, especially for nerds like me. But just little things like the branch that they use to wipe the blood on the door, that is the same branch that the Roman soldiers used to offer Jesus wine on the cross. That's crazy. Little stuff like that is jam-packed in this story, and it would have been really cool if the movie had depicted at least some of it, but I understand. I'll forgive them because it's a long movie, and that's just kind of fun things for Catholic nerds like me. But still, it's really cool, right? It was kind of disappointing how the Red Sea just kind of floated away. That wasn't very epic. In Scripture, it says, the Israelites marched into the midst of the sea on dry land, with water like a wall to their right and to their left. No offense, but I think Prince of Egypt got that one a little bit better than this. Pharaoh's army wasn't supposed to die in a cliff accident. They died crossing the Red Sea, chasing everybody else when the waters rushed in on them. It says so right here, everybody. As the water flowed back, it covered the chariots and the charioteers of Pharaoh's whole army, which had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not a single one of them escaped. Boom. Okay. Huge, huge fun fact here. We're about to get real. Okay, you ready for this one? Breathe, breathe. Okay, so this is real. Archaeological excavations have found in the Red Sea there's a path that's elevated above the rest of the sea that goes straight across the sea. And on that pathway, these excavations have found chariot wheels dating back to Pharaoh's time, to this very time period, bones and crazy stuff like that. You can look it up. I'll put a link right here to it. Also in the box down below. Check it out because this stuff is crazy cool. They found this stuff in 1978. Ron Wyatt is the guy's name. Check him out. Overall, I found this to be a really great movie. It has plausible artistic depictions of how the plagues occurred, which employs both faith and reason. God started it all, but he's using natural disasters and things like that to make this all happen, and then they spiral, which is very likely what could have happened. Still, I have to say that the producers missed out on some pretty amazing stuff. For example, the Egyptians followed in pursuit. All Pharaoh's horses and chariots and charioteers went after them right into the midst of the sea. In the night watch, just before dawn, the Lord cast through the column of the fiery cloud upon the Egyptian force a glance that threw it into a panic, and he so clogged their chariot wheels that they could hardly drive. With that, the Egyptians sounded the retreat before Israel, because the Lord was fighting for them against the Egyptians. Boom. God rules. I really do think this is a great movie, and I recommend anyone to see it. However, the viewer should be careful to make sure that they're maturely discerning what's accurate and what's not, and what's scriptural and what's not. Like anything. I gave it 2 thumbs up. USCCB rating is a 3, in case you were wondering. So, also, one of my favorite Bible verses right here says, Exodus 14:14, the Lord will fight for you, and you have only to be still. Thanks, everybody. Hope this helps.
Pretty dance. 73%. Only not Chicago.
And that was Heavy Reviews by FoSchissel.